We've had a chance to have a quick chat with many of the teams up and down pit lane. There's a lot to talk about after race one. The difference between the first race in comparison to the next two, these are 30 lappers, and we are minus one car due to a very interesting ride for Mark Winterbottom.
Yeah, that was really quite extraordinary, wasn't it? And a lot of news as always stemming from the pit paddock between races. Something the drivers noted in race one was how difficult it was to get the cars off the line with sufficient fuel for 22 laps. It'll be even tougher today because they're running the 325 dip. It's a very tall gearing in the car and quite a grippy surface, so a lot of people complained about not being able to launch away their cars very effectively. Todd Kelly in particular had a slipping clutch. He couldn't really go near it for a couple of laps until it normalised, and here is how they will line up on the Talon Tough Tools starting grid for today, headed by Todd Kelly, and that's refreshing for him.
There's a couple of drivers I want to point out for you to take a look at where they ended up the end of race one, where they will start race two. The most notable one is West Point Racing's Glenn Seaton. He came from 21st to 14th, a mighty effort. So too for Cameron McConville, 23rd to 16th. And John Bow a little further back in the pack, but he made a significant 8 positions from 30th to 22nd. So some guys making some good forward movements, but tyres was the chat when I went for a walk down pit lane.
Yes, and those people have got cars that are reasonably in balance, Lee, are sort of shrugging their shoulders and saying, yes, you've got to be delicate with the car, but those that are battling the setup of their vehicles are certainly talking about tyres. And on that subject, but located in a different place, on the apex of the turn 14 corner, the very last corner that brings you onto the pit straight, they were the tyres that Mark Scaife bumped into yesterday that did the damage on the front left-hand corner of the air dam on that car. And it was because he was so close to the back of Stephen Richards' car at the time. He was really hustling him. He just didn't sight them and he clobbered them. That cost him in the pit stop.
Darryl.
The drivers were given an extra drive-through or sighting lap, different to what they normally get. They out lap and around to the start-finish line. They all drove through the pits, and a lot of them have taken that opportunity to try setups from yesterday. A lot of them adjusting roll centres and having a run on that lap out. So all taking advantage and looking for speed for this race, with the temperature being a lot higher than yesterday. Rusty?
That temperature you're talking about, Darryl, currently 29 degrees ambient. On track it is 38 at present here at the Shanghai International Circuit. Now, over the radio, we've picked up a little bit of chat between Jason Bright and his engineer, his Ford Performance Racing engineer, Phil Keed. Jason says as he left pit lane and grabbed second gear, it felt like the clutch was slipping. There may also be a misfire with that car, so keep an eye on the Bright machine.
Good day for Jason yesterday, finishing in the top 10 in 7th.
And those carbon-faced clutches, as we look at Stephen Richards here, can slip when they're either too cool or too hot. And hopefully that won't be a problem for him in the race. Good brakes were a strength for Jason yesterday, but he made a shocker of a start. He felt that the balance of the car was great when it was low on its fuel, but higher in the fuel load, the car wasn't particularly strong. They went away and made a lot of changes overnight. Ditto for this man. They've made big changes to the rear end of the car. He said he had too much oversteer later in the race, and given the extra length of races 2 and 3, he needed to make a correction to get that car to settle down.
And some very long faces in the Buick or HSV garage. Rick Kelly yesterday, after qualifying at the rear of the grid, they had a clutch fail very early in the first race. The fingers on the pressure plate completely collapsed, and Kelly has had to have a gearbox replaced. The spigot shaft in the gearbox turned blue with the enormous amount of heat. The big clutch problem for them yesterday. He's hoping for a much better run and a good start here today.
And it will be an issue in this race too at the start with this extra fuel load. They'll have about between 100 and 110 litres of fuel on board, which is near enough to full. On the subject of gearboxes, Brad Jones replaced the gearbox in the 21 car overnight as well. It was jumping out of gear. That weird misfire that's plagued the Dodo Racing entry of Jamie Whincup is still there. They've not been able to exercise that demon.
We very much enjoyed the late stages of the first race with the storming Craig Lowndes coming through. Should give some credit to his teammate Steve Ellery, who was turned around very early in the race, was right at the back of the field, came through. The 888 team executed a very slick pit stop, and Ellery was able to make his way back through to 15th place, so he was pretty chuffed with that. It's where he started, but the day could have been a lot worse, so we'll keep an eye out late in this race for the 2 888 Fords as well. I spoke with Stephen Richards moments ago and said, can you go with Kelly if it's you two up the front again? He said, today I know that I can. Revs rise, race 2 here in Shanghai, get ready for it. They're gone. And a good start from Kelly, an even one, but Richo again. Stephen Richards, carbon copy of race 1, flies from the line in the Castrol Perkins Commodore. Lowndes has gone to the inside. He slots into third. Oh, Radicic gets shoved out by Ambrose.
Scaife was slow away again, and he and Scaife are very close at turn 1. Radicic was forced wide as they were making the initial braking approach, and Dumbrell's in the grass here, side by side with Ingle.
Trying to avoid each other. Jason Richards is coming on strong. Whincup, his teammates in right behind him.
There's the new tyre bundle covering up those metal grates that caused the problem yesterday on the link road through the chicane turns 4 and 5.
Radicic responded there. He stayed on the outside of Ambrose going through the 1-2 complex and was able to tuck through on the inside. So he's there behind Scaife. It's Richards, Todd Kelly, Craig Lowndes, Mark Scaife, Paul Radicic, your top 5. How about Richard starts?
Yeah, beauties, aren't they? Very strong. Everybody will be trying to drive their cars as straight as they dare at the moment. Continue to hustle along, but not slide them too much. Remember, compulsory pit stop. That's Marcus up on the ripple strips. The car rumbles across those. Very aggressive if you get too high on them. Jason Richards right in behind him.
An extra 8 laps this race. Look at Whincup go to the inside. He's looking for an option on Tander. Locks up big time. Whoa, Jamie Whincup. That was wild stuff. Went for the big run and we've got cars turned around. That's Greg Murphy. And Jason Richards was tangled in that as well. And around goes one of the BOC cars.
Puts Murphy to virtually the back of the field. Craig Lowndes is reporting a clutch slipping in that car, so the thing that we spoke about prior to the race is valid. Look at Scaife down the inside. That's the reason that Lowndes is vulnerable. That clutch is slipping, but actually crisscrosses him and Craig goes back underneath as they enter turn 2.
These two had a fabulous scrap in the opening race this weekend, and it was good, fair, clean driving. It was just hard. On board with Scaife.
More problems here for Greg Murphy just on the little access road there at turn 1, so he's gone straight ahead on the braking approach to 1.
Top 10 result in race 1. Unlikely to happen again. Race for the lead. It's Stephen Richards, Todd Kelly. Gap back to Lowndes, who's under increasing pressure from Scaife. And Radicic learned a lot from race 1. He said, I know I can be better in race 2. Here's Scaife. He blows by Lowndes.
Yeah, it'll be just lazy off the corner, and that's allowed Radicic to blow by as well, and Ambrose. So that clutch has cooked itself, and he just described in my right ear that it's got a huge clutch slip. That'll frustrate the 888 guys, so it will have cooked up on the line.
The rat,
mate, get into a rhythm.
And in fact, it's going to fail, I'd say. It completely destroyed itself.
absolute frustration for Craig Lowndes. The Eastern Creek round winner. It's on here just ahead of Stephen Johnson. Damage on the front of Jason Richards' car. Whincup has regrouped, and it's Bryden Tander going hard at it. Big lock up again from the Dodo Racing Commodore, and Richards has given Johnson a tap. Tander goes around.
You know why that happened? When he put his foot on the brake down the other end, there was all that fluid and garbage, and together with carbon fibre going under the front wheels, he couldn't stop the car, and he's drilled everybody. There's a lot of fluid down there now as well. That'll trap people if they're not well aware of what's going on.
What a dramatic turnaround. Lowndes is out of this one. There's Murphy in the background. Roland Dane, Campbell Little.
Hey, mate, just nose it straight into the garage, guys. We need to start on this straight away. Nose it straight in, please.
See Campbell talking there in the background, so they'll be straight up on the jacks. Very difficult to deal with a stinking hot race car in those conditions. Meanwhile, Todd Kelly's got good car pace, just threatening, lurking around the back of Stephen Richards at the moment.
Menacing him, isn't he? I asked Stephen Richards if the move was fair in turn one yesterday, and he said absolutely. He said, I had massive understeer and I opened the door and Todd slipped through, understandably. And then he was able to drive away, gap Stephen Richards, and ultimately win the first race. Here's Lowndes limping into the pits. How things can turn so quickly. Good pressure on at the front here. There's a handy gap back, though, to our third place man, Mark Scaife. Quickest guy on the track is our race leader, Stephen Richards, at 1:52.26. Look at the inside line.
Driving down the gutter, making Todd go the long way. That puts him out where all that oil and debris was, though. He'll have to be careful when he gets to the braking area here. You'll see it bob up in the moment.
Stephen Richards is a hard guy to get by. And Ambrose on the inside of Radicic.
Done.
Radicic on that corner yesterday was very unhappy with the treatment he received from Greg Murphy. He said it was a little bit too physical for my liking, but Murphy is nowhere near him in this one. He was tangled up in a mess early. Radicic now in the top 5. Can he go with Marcus Ambrose? They had a horsepower concern. They said we're not quick enough in a straight line.
Fastest man on the track, Scaife, 1:51.5. Richards the leader, 52.2. Todd Kelly, 52.4. Ambrose, 52.1. So Scaife's the only one in the 51s at the moment. Good pace.
I spoke earlier about Stephen Ellery's great progress in the opening race this weekend, where he came from the back of the field back to 15th. He's now moved into the top 10. And the Dodo car of Jason Richards in the pit box. Day done.
Yeah, massive amount of damage on that. That'll sideline that car. They may be able to turn it around for race 3, but there'll be a lot of work involved. Meantime, Greg Murphy's complaining about an oil alarm on his dashboard, and I think they'll have to shut that car down and put him out of business, and he's now in pit lane.
Zinger replay. Have a look at this.
Mate. No, it wasn't. They thought it was a fault.
Whoa. How'd you see that one, Neil?
Bit hard to know who did what to who. Here's where Greg Murphy, well, there's the reason why the thing's got an oil alarm. Everything would be alarming after that, particularly alarming in your head. That thing just flew through the air, though. Normally there's not gravel on the outside of turn 1. Here's the replay again of the Jason Richards problem. After the splitter had gone under the front tyres, it nailed Stephen Johnson, who in turn got Garth Tander. So his woes continue. And here is, as I described before, Greg Murphy in the pit lane. Scaife down the inside of his teammate Kelly. He's flying at the moment.
Kelly switches back side by side. The two HRT boys going at it. Scaife's got the preferred line, though, into the final turn and takes second place. Let's get down to the Dodo camp.
And there's a fair bit of damage to the front of car 3, Lee. Jason Richards, just walk us through what happened from your point of view.
Yeah, on the opening lap, we got a big hit from Bridie from behind going into the hairpin and caused us to hit Marcus, and then a bit of a chaos. Going down into the next lap and back into the hairpin, went in there and just didn't stop and went straight ahead. So obviously picked up some damage on the initial contact.
Quickly, can you get it ready for the next race?
So it was a pretty big hit, Rusty, you know, like there was a big shock into the system. So, you know, hopefully, the cars are going so good and it was such a strong weekend for us. But look, we'll just have to, the boys are going to work on it frantically, and I know they'll do the best to get them out there.
I'd like Jason. Darryl?
Well, Craig, obviously we heard on the radio there's a clutch issue with that car. Was it from the start of the race?
No, actually the start, I got a really good start, which is something we worked on from yesterday. The start yesterday wasn't too good, but we got a great start. Jump mark. It's actually going into the hairpin for the first lap there. I come out of there and it started to slip. And I just thought it might have been a little bit overcooked, but as I got further around the circuit, I was just trying to be a baby on it. But unfortunately, no, it got worse. We managed just to get back into pit lane. It was slipping pretty badly at the end.
It looked like there was maybe a fire there initially. Was there a fluid issue there?
No, actually they thought a fire at first, but it's actually the brake fluid, maybe a slave cylinder or something's burst underneath, but there's just a bit of brake fluid, sort of smoke, not actually coming from the engine.
That's great.
Thank you.
It's been a Holden weekend thus far, but Ford's main man is looming. Ambrose is definitely closing in on Todd Kelly and Mark Scaife. The Rats trying to go with him. The Cat Ford of Bright, well placed.
Huge moment when the back of the car jumped sideways. This is damage to Stephen Johnson's car as a result of what happened down at the hairpin. And the thing that we were hesitant about earlier on was trying to work out what did happen to Jason Richards initially with that initial contact we saw. We now know that it was contact between he and Jason Bright, which took another lap for it to fully unfold and turn into the little mess that we've just seen. But on successive laps, both the HRT cars have totally uncoupled from the road through the fast chicane at 4 and 5. On the previous lap, it was Mark Scaife that had a moment. He was vulnerable again to Todd Kelly. On this most recent lap, Todd Kelly got way out of shape there a minute ago in the rear of the car. And Marcus is now sweating. He's almost gone well. Did go straight ahead.
Pit window is now open.
They had actually called him in. And I think he just forgot for a moment, was going to have a lunge at Todd and realised he was due to come in.
Race leaders in. Fourth place man is in.
Yeah, I just struggled with the rear of the car. 3 bar down, I got a lot of push. I can't get the front bar back, it's locked. But I think we're going to struggle with rears. Not as much as you did the first time on my second practice run, mate. Probably about half of that.
Yeah, okay, Mark. Just turn the pit light off for us.
Scafe's gone quicker again, 51.5.335. Fastest lap of the race. Marcus in.
Going left side. You heard Marcus Ambrose say to Paul Forgy, I think we're going to struggle with rears. We'll find out. 8 laps longer today.
Good stop from Stone Brothers. They serviced that car very efficiently. Marcus had it leaping by the time it was coming down off the jacks, and away he went. Changed the working side tyres. That's down the left-hand side of the car for this longer race too.
So they exit as they entered. Richards ahead of Ambrose.
The weekend started so strongly for the Super Cheap Auto team, and particularly for you, Greg Murphy. What happened there in that concertina?
Go, Jack, on the front. Listen to me,
well,
mate.
yeah, typical concertina at the hairpin, and you know, still sort of doing everything okay, and got tagged from behind as I turned in. So someone's gone in way too deep or whatever, I'm not sure, and turned us around, and so we were last, got going, and got a bad run onto the front straight and stuffed up, went too deep into turn 1. I was very narrow, trying to sort of hold off a couple of blokes, and it was too narrow. And that was the end of that. I couldn't stop the car, couldn't turn it, and we head for the gravel.
We've just seen the replay now. You got some big air then.
It felt like it in the car, don't worry about that. But, you know, it's just a disaster, actually.
Good luck, Greg.
Thanks.
That was Dukes of Hazzard style.
Pretty wild. 7th in the championship going into this race, 552 points. We expected strong results from Greg here this weekend. He started out very strongly in day 1 of practice. The general consensus was that his driving style and the way he's been working with that car would work pretty well here. Here's Garth Tander, been in the woes, tangled up in the drama down at the hairpin in those opening couple of laps through no fault of his own. Damage to the front and rear of that car, but it hasn't stopped it, fortunately, so he'll still score points, but he's down in 25th place.
Look at this, pressure on, Neil, pressure on. Here comes Richards. Scafe's been released. They'll stay as is, but Richards is up at race pace. Is he close enough now to mount a challenge to Scafey?
Mark's going to have to be super careful here with these cold tyres. Not sure whether they did working side or rears.
Definitely goes to show how tough it is for someone like Murphy, who started 3rd yesterday in race 1 to finish 10th. He had fuel pressure issues in that car and dropped through the field, so it's tough in this category when you get back amongst the 8th and 10th position and you've got to battle.
Yeah, when you're further down the order, as you know, Darryl, it just becomes hard work. Even if you have a little speed advantage, you're not able to use it. And that's one of the difficulties, particularly with the complex in the middle of this circuit where there's a fair bit of follow the leader.
All of that mess in the opening couple of laps has benefited 3 drivers in particular, Seaton, Wheel and McConville. They have been the big winners out of everybody spinning and dropping off the track. We will keep an eye on those 3. Scaife, Richards, Ambrose going together here. Todd Kelly has stayed out. He is leading the race at the moment over Radisich.
Good job, mate. Good job.
All of the top guys and leading teams now do such a great job of dealing with cold tyres and hustling the car in awkward circumstances. Whenever you've got 2 cold tyres on a car and 2 warm tyres, they're a real handful to drive. Todd Kelly in for his service.
You may have seen in the background Paul Radisich for Team Kiwi Racing. He also came in. Here is the HRT gang. They did a beautiful job with Todd Kelly yesterday, and they've done it again. Nice work, Greg.
3.5 seconds, Lee, a time that matches that of Russell Ingall, who stopped just moments ago. But the contrast here is they changed rear tyres on the Ingall car. They've changed the passenger side on both Todd Kelly, and I can also tell you they took the same approach on Mark Scaife's car. Everyone's treating this concrete down here a little more cautiously today, trying to make sure they pull up on the line.
Well, quite a number of them overshot in the pit stop for race 1. Very easy to do. Saw a couple of people on the first day of practice when there was a bit of water around come into garages on the painted surface, and they just about went out through the back of the garage. But even at 40 k's when you're on the limiter and you think this is walking pace in the car, it's still pretty hairy. You've got to be very careful in the pit lane. Those laps while Todd Kelly was out in front by himself may not have been as productive as they could have been, because he's come out behind Marcus Ambrose. Ambrose didn't need to pass him on the track. He did it in pit lane. So that was easy work for the Pertec Ford. Todd will just be resetting the anti-roll bars in the car, having a think about brake bias. Long run now from here on this half set of tyres that he's just taken on. Need to try and keep the car hustled along, but at the same time not use up anything too much. It'd be very easy to abuse the left rear tyre on this circuit or overuse the brakes. And at the end of this big long straight that Paul Radisich is on at the moment, big hot stop here, stopping from just inside the 200 board. If that's not bad enough, when you do the U-turn and come back out at 12.13 and head up to the last turn, 14, it's another pretty big brake application there, and it's that second application that some drivers have been complaining about. Paul was talking about this after race 1, that it's this next stop that he's approaching where you get a little bit of what's described as knockoff, where front brakes are roaring hot, the pads settle back in the caliper, and when you apply the brake pedal you get too much rear brake, so the back of the car wants to jump out. This is on board with Mark Scaife. Terrific shot. Let's have a bit of a look and listen. Turn 1, we're just coming into the second part of it, second gear, turn 2. Straight. This is over a kilometre long, this next run.
20 laps to go, mate. Think about your balance, think about your balance.
Safety tap to make sure there's pedal pressure. Lock the brake there. Overshot. We were with him when he actually locked it, then he's now told them that he's got a little mark on the left-hand front tyre. Comfortable margin over Stephen Richards though, isn't it? And now Kelly has caught Ambrose somewhat. We'll keep an eye on that. Jason Bright is leading this race at the moment. Here's the Zinger replay. And the reason I knew it was I could see the steering wheel snatch in Mark's hands, and you could see the way he was pumping the brake pedal trying to get that front wheel turning again. It becomes a manual form of ABS, if you like, to make sure that the wheel rotates. If it stops, it puts a big flat spot or mark on the tyre, and that's the sort of thing that can damage you pretty quickly in a race. It's done so easily. If he might have only braked, could have been something on the surface of the road, or he might have braked half a car length or a metre or two later, and whack, you damage it. That's Jason Bargwana. He's been on the radio complaining. He said the engine just shut down on him. No wonder Todd Kelly's catching Marcus Ambrose. New lap record, here it is. 1:51.05 for Todd Kelly. And turns up the heat on Marcus Ambrose. Still not yet halfway distance in this race. And the pit window will stay open for another 10 laps. Closes at 21. Bright, Wills, Ritter, Baird, McConville, Andrew Jones. The top 6 cars on the racetrack haven't stopped. Kelly switches line. He's gone on the inside of Ambrose, side by side, door to door. And Kelly, the quick man on the track, gets through. But does he have enough pace? Does he have enough speed? Is everything right for him to catch Richards and Scaife? I think the last 10 laps of this race are going to be fascinating, because as we wore down the laps in race 1, it came alive in the latter stages. This is a racetrack that will reward those that can keep all 4 tyres under the car performing nicely, no flat spots, looking after the balance, looking after your brakes. We saw Lowndes absolutely on fire yesterday in the latter stages, still in the 51s. Still got a long way to go. And Ambrose doesn't look like he's done by any measure at this point.
Jason Bryan in for a stop that time around. They put a lot of tape on the front of that car to hold the front splitter up. It's broken in the front. Obviously, some of these guys and a lot of them that came in for pit stops look like they've been clipping those tyres and damaging the splitters, and they took that opportunity to put 4 tyres on it as well.
Well, it's a lonely walk back up pit lane for Jason Bargwanna. It sounded as though the engine just cut out. Do you know why? Did it give you some sort of warning, Jace?
No, I just pulled 4th gear there coming onto the straight, and she just shut down. It's like it's had an electrical failure or something like that. Just nothing. It was as if someone had turned the switch off. I tried to refire it, but it just doesn't like it at all.
Tough weekend for the Orcon camp.
Oh, it's been a tough weekend for the boys, but look, we'll come back, we'll be back, and we'll go and kick some butt.
Thanks, Jason.
Radicic seems to be making progress on Ambrose. There's a healthy gap back of about 5 or 6 seconds back to Russell Ingall, who's the next in the order from Seaton, McConville, Dumbrell and Wheel. It's Ritter at the front though. He and Andrew Jones are yet to make their compulsory pit stop for tyres.
These key guys are all just eyeing each other off at the moment. They're all getting gaps from their respective crew chiefs. And I'll be watching it very carefully as they play the chess game into the second half of the race. With this diff ratio in the cars here, which is the same one as in years gone by we've used at Bathurst, for this year it'll actually be a taller one for the first time. You may be curious to know the speeds. In first gear, peaking speed of 112 k's. In second gear, 145 k's. In third gear, 173. In fourth gear, 213, 259 kilometres an hour in fifth gear, and 288 kilometres per hour in sixth gear, which they virtually reach at the end of the long straight. They're doing about 284, 285 clicks down the other end.
It's incredible, isn't it? 145 in second gear.
Yeah, that's right. You burst through the legal speed limit in first gear in these cars off the start line.
You picked up in that chat before from Mark Scaife back to the Holden Racing team that there's a slight problem with the left front tyre on that car. He's complained that it's caused a bit of a vibration inside the cabin, but having spoken to Robbie Starr, the team manager down here, he said there's been no comments from Mark over the last few laps. Fingers crossed here at HRT at present.
You'll have to nurse that very carefully because it's so easy for the flat spot to return to the same point under a peak braking load.
Darryl?
Glenn Seaton's found him in a position this weekend. He's worked himself way up through the field in race one. That car, whenever they have green tyres all round or good tyres on it, the rear tyres have got too much drive for the front. He says it has enormous amounts of push early on in the race. Then we do our pit stops and I have the same problem, but towards the end yesterday the car was fantastic, the best it's been, and he's now slowly working his way up through the field.
He's 10th at the moment, Darryl, but Ritter is yet to perform his compulsory stop. And there is the first DJR West Point 4. It's the damaged Stephen Johnson's car behind Ingall, but he is out of the mix. He's back in 28th. It's the next one we're interested in. Car 18 is Glenn Seaton. Talking with
Rusty, your times are very good. You're the same as Skate, mate.
Dean Orr and Dick Johnson earlier. They said Seaton went for more of a race setup straight up. Sacrificed qualifying, had to come through, knows that he races well, and has done so. Feel a little bit for this guy. Stephen Johnson made his first top 10 shootout of the year and was definitely in the mix this weekend. Not now, though.
Answering the question on the pace of Mark Scaife after marking that tyre, 152.1 for him on this lap, 152.2 for Stephen Richards. So he's maintaining the pace. In fact, he's got a tiny edge. His teammate Todd Kelly at 52 even, Marcus Ambrose 52.7. Greg Ritter's the leader of the race, but yet to perform his stop. That leaves the net situation of Scaife, Richards, Kelly, Ambrose, then Radicic and Ingall, who did a complete revision of the setup of that car between races.
Yeah, the other one who I'm interested in, Neil, who has snuck up, who started 17th yesterday, didn't have a good race yesterday, went back to 20th, but now is in 11th place, or effectively 10th, is Paul Wheel. So his teammate Greg Murphy hasn't had a good day, but Wheel is still flying the flat flag for Super Cheap Auto Racing.
Just an observation from some of the pit stops we've seen so far today. A little bit of variance between some of the teams. The key guys that are doing it well seem to be doing it around the 3-second marker or low 3-second marker, and among the fastest at the moment, Gary Rogers Motorsport. They've been doing an outstanding job in the category's new pit stop competition, but often, to do well in a simulated scenario and then replicate it in a race, Neil, is very, very difficult. But they've done low 3-second stops today for both Andrew Jones and Cameron McConville.
It's fantastic to watch. It's a joy to watch a lot of these crews working, and it is very difficult under extreme conditions in the pit lane with stinking hot brakes and wheels and hot tyres. You watch the way in which the crews just whip those wheels on and off and get the nuts torqued back up and the safety pins back in place. It's fantastic. And if ever you've tried to do it and you end up with about 13 thumbs in the process, it's quite remarkable.
Looking here at 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, Wheel, Whincup, Dumbrell and Morris. And Paul Wheeler's fighting to stay in the top 10 in this championship. Paul Radicic came into this race only 1 point behind him, but the Rat is flying this weekend for Team Kiwi. He's up in 6th at the moment.
You're mentioning Paul Radicic, Lee. I spoke to Paul Sepranich, his chief engineer, before the start of this race. He said we struggled a little bit yesterday with the rear of the car breaking away. So he said what we've done, we've put heavier front springs in the front of that car and gone down a little bit in the rear roll centre. It looks like it's working for him.
Paul Wheel had a long face at the conclusion of the first race, but a bit of spring in his step today. They had a slow pit stop yesterday. They had a fouled wheel nut on the right rear of the car, and it cost him an enormous amount of time. Today, the Super Cheap Auto team completed the stop in about 6 seconds, and Paul felt that even though they'd be carrying an extra 30 litres of fuel or thereabouts for this longer race today, he felt the car would still be strong in the latter stages.
If Scaife can continue to nurse this car at the moment, he's on target for a second win in this season. We've had 7 drivers record a win so far in the 11 races today. Murphy's won 3, Ambrose 3, Lowndes, Scaife, Ingle, Stephen Richards and Todd Kelly 1 apiece. I think that's been one of the interesting talking points about the championship so far, is the variety in race winners and round winners. It's good, great for the championship.
They're throwing it around, and I think you can say at this stage, as we ride on board with Russell Ingall, we're looking at our 5th different round winner in the opening 5 rounds of the championship, and that has never happened.
Love watching foot cam. On board with Russell, second dab at the brake there just to return some load back to the fronts. This is back to second gear for turn 2, then you run down the hill, squeeze of the throttle, a little bit of brake again, and another second stab just to get the nose on line. Flat shift up to 3rd. This is a brake for the blind brow at 4. See how gentle you've got to be with the throttle with over 600 horsepower available to you. There's the tyres on the right that they've placed to cover up that rogue drain. There's a bit of fancy footwork for you.
Just about to say, we've seen Dancing Homer, this is Dancing Russell.
Little safety tap to make sure that he's got pedal pressure, and he might have a little bit of pedal knock-off, brake knock-off. Having a second stab at the brake pedal every time. What you find is once the grip goes away and they're lurking in high 51s, low to mid 52s, being quick in a V8 supercar is being all about the process of trying to flow the car. They actually don't respond to aggression. It's more a question of measuring yourself, and that's what Russell's doing at the moment.
Much improved performance today from Ingall. 13th to 6th.
So a little double shuffle back to 1st gear in this case. See how gentle he is on the 1st gear application, because it's so easy to make wheel spin. Gets all the way up to 4th and then back to 2nd for turn 14. He has that second stab each time at the brake pedal just to get the nose back online. And now passing his pit crew.
Difficult to get your mind around keeping your foot flat and changing gears?
No, not really. It feels quite natural. Look at this, Bradley just running up against the tyres here. The Zinger replay captures that nicely. A bit too close there, young Bradley.
So it's Scaife up front, still being pursued by Stephen Richards. Greg Ritter is actually at the front of the pack, but he is yet to stop. Compulsory stop for tyres, and he's only got 4 laps left to do that. And Kelly still in the hunt as well. He's closing the gap on Stephen Richards.
Going back to your question, Lee, about what does it feel like when you're flat shifting in the car, there's a little mechanism that just aids the drivers in this process. It's called a shift cut, and it just momentarily interrupts the electrical or spark supply to the engine for just fractions of a second, thousandths of a second, and it enables the load to come off the gearbox for the driver to be able to make the shift through the pattern. And it just releases the load sufficiently so that you can whip the change through. And of course, the real effect of that is that, oh, David Bernard's pointing the wrong way there in the right pattern Shakespeare Ford. The net effect of that is that the rear wheels drive for longer. So if you imagine you're boring down the back straight here, you're making the change from 5th to 6th. By the time you cycle the clutch pedal and lift on and off the throttle pedal, that effectively stops the rear wheels driving for some number of metres. It might be 10 or 15 or 20 metres. With flat shifting, it does still interrupt the drive, but for a very small period of time. It might only interrupt drive for a couple of metres in the back of the car.
Getting back to the diversity of results in this championship and the variety of winners, which has been wonderful in season 2005. It reminds me a lot of the beginning of the AFL or rugby league season. Winners were so difficult to predict, and it's been that case in the V8 Supercar Championship this year. Zinger replay.
Looks like David just got into the grey on the outside of the corner. The track is beginning to rubber up quite nicely now in this second race. You can see a distinct black line there, and it looked like David just got a little bit wide, got one or two wheels out on the grey verge where there's no grip, and he turned the WPS Ford around. I don't think there'll be any great damage done, but he'll have dropped some spots. He's down the order at the moment.
Almost at race 1 distance. It was 22 laps for the opening one this weekend. Oh, Scaife locked up there. Going into the final turn, there was a little puff of smoke.
He'll have to be very careful with this because the tendency...
Colt's not really gaining much now, it's about the same.
That's Stephen Richards. The tendency will be for that flat spot to want to keep on getting worse. You have to be very careful in the way he applies the pedal. 52.7 for Scaife, 52.6 for Richards, 2.6 for Kelly, 3.1 for Ambrose, 3 even for Paul Radisich, 2.4 for Russell Ingall, so he's the quickest guy, 2.5 for Glenn Seaton, quickest of the top 10 cars, so watch out for Ingall and Seaton. Remember I said that early, just that it'll be the latter stages, the last 10 laps of this race that I think will be fascinating. The fellas that have got a good balance in their car and look after their tyres will have a sharp arrow at the end.
Look at the Rat. He's closing in on Ambrose. Very pleased with this car, this team. Very comfortable. Some frustration, as I mentioned earlier, with the straight line speed or lack thereof. But they've got a bit of a smile on their face down in that camp. They think they might have the updated Alan Draper engines, maybe even as soon as Hidden Valley. They may have one.
Garth Tander getting out of shape down at turn 12 and runs off over the edge of the AstroTurf. No great damage done there, but drops spots.
Look at Kelly tucked in right in behind Stephen Richards, trying to maximise everything, trying to get any advantage. But he can't quite creep any closer, and Scaife is doing it comfortably. Behind these guys, after Radisich, it's Ingall, Seaton, McConville and Jamie Whincup in the top 10.
Greg Ritter and Ford Performance Racing are playing right to the very edge of the pit window. He's still officially the leader of the race, but hasn't done his compulsory stop for tyres. And that opportunity will close out for him in the next lap. So they were obviously hoping for a safety car or something to help gamble their way up the order, which is often one of those games that you can play if you've had a tough weekend and you need to play a little bit all or nothing, but today he's going to get nothing from that strategy.
That's exactly what happened with the Sirame Commodore driver Paul Morris yesterday. He said at the end of the day, what happened? He said, we were just rolling the dice, hoping for a safety car. Staying out, but it didn't come.
All things considered, brand new track and lots of little tripwires in this place and gravel to go and find yourself playing in. There's actually been very few in the way of major incidents. Really no safety car intervention and no great dramas.
The damage on the front of the car and the skirmish that he got caught up in was costly for Jason Bright, who was a top 10 runner in race 1. He is way down the order in the 20s. This is a very productive weekend for the man we're riding on board with, Stephen Richards. Third in the championship, closing in significantly on Russell Ingall. finished ahead of the two guys ahead of him in the championship in race 1, and he's ahead of both of them now. So a nice weekend so far for the Castrol man.
Team boss Larry Perkins didn't come up to China this weekend.
Castrol team boys were very happy yesterday because crucially Stephen finished in front of his key rivals in the championship, but also that the car was strong in the latter part of the race, so perhaps we're seeing that form continue on. The track temperature for this race started out at 38 degrees. It has risen to 40. A lot of the data in relation to cabin temperature doesn't get fed back live, but the teams will monitor it between races. At the conclusion of yesterday's race, most of the cabin temperatures we were getting were 51 degrees, and you can only expect that it's even hotter than that today.
One guy yesterday, Greg, that was trying to fix that problem with cabin temperature, and it was a surprise, was Stephen Richards. He said to me last night, he said, it's the first time ever I ran a cool suit yesterday. He said, boy, didn't it help, I love it. And today being hotter, you'll be enjoying that.
They make an enormous difference, and some of them are equipped with like a skull cap and have little capillaries of ice water running through them, and it's if you turn the switch on, it's amazing. It just completely transforms you. Heat is the big enemy in the cars, and the hotter you are, the more when your adrenaline's pumping, it excites your heart rate. It's kind of it's a diminishing drama. You just end up in a situation where you get hot, you can't concentrate, you get hotter, your heart beats faster, and it keeps on getting worse. So a lot of them now putting a lot more time and effort and thought into how to channel cool air into the car or run the cool suits. And no good having the very latest in race car technology that finds you a tenth of a second if the guy's that hot that he can barely do the job and loses seconds huffing and puffing.
Speaking of cabin temperatures yesterday, Neil, was also interesting. A few of them after the race was saying that they had sore eyes and they thought that the fuel blend or something about the fuel here was different, and Marcus was one of those, so that was interesting.
The fastest fellow on the racetrack in the last lap or so, just looking down the computer order, was Jamie Whincup. He did a 52.1 on the last lap, and he's still in contention here. He's 10th, a lot of laps still to come.
On lap 21 now, and Greg Ritter will need to come in and perform his compulsory pit stop. You're looking at Buick's Rick Kelly running in 17th at the moment, 16th realistically once Ritter performs his stop. He's being hounded by Brad Jones. Getting back to that cool suit conversation, Neil, I guess the other side of the coin is when they fail, they can steam you like a dim sim, can't they?
One failed on me in Darwin of all places a few years ago. And you can imagine some of the chat on the radio.
So Ritter has now come in. We're in our correct order. It's Scaife, Richards, Todd Kelly, Marcus Ambrose, Paul Radisich, the top 5. Then Ingles, Seaton. And Ingles within a shot of Glenn Seaton, incidentally. And then McConville, Whincup, and Paul Wheel. That's the top 10.
Greg Ritter, incidentally, has now peeled off and taken that stop. So that corrects the order in the field. Scaife, Richards, Kelly, Ambrose, Radisich, Ingles, Seaton, McConville, Whincup, and
9 to go, 9 laps to go.
And the charges of the gang at the moment, the fastest bloke in the top 10 is, well, it's jointly shared between Marcus Ambrose and Jamie Whincup, in fact, and Stephen Richards. They've all done 52.5s on this lap.
Andrew Jones in the Valvoline Cummins Commodore. And this, I'd have to say, is a solid run for Andrew. He's certainly been caught up in a lot of trouble in season 2005, but to be in the top 20 is a solid performance. His teammate, on the other hand, is in the top 10. And McConville, who had dreadful rear tyre trouble yesterday, barely made it to this distance, to lap 22, is looking strong now.
They were tucking into their penne late last night at about 10:30, and I said, it's a bit late for dinner, you blokes. And they were moaning and groaning because they'd been out PRing into the evening and working their commercial duties. And they were a bit frustrated by their car performance during the day, but like everybody in this field, they've done a lot of work to try and correct the performance of the cars.
Just wandered up to the pit wall and had a word to Gary Rogers and Cameron McConville's engineer, Phil Curtis. Phil says they're going okay at the moment. Yesterday, with about 8 or 10 laps to go, Cameron lost the strength and the feeling in the rear tyres. He felt that the car would really fall over on itself in those closing radius corners. They've changed the setup for this race and it's made a big improvement, but crucially, says Phil, we've saved a good set of tyres for the final race.
There's no worries about Cameron McConville making the distance. He's super fit. In fact, he's going to ride a bicycle from Melbourne to to Mount Panorama, hoping to raise $40,000 for a yet-to-be-named charity. It's called Ride to the Mountain. We wish he and Andrew Jones well with that. Final 6 laps of this race. And Scaife has a quick look in the mirror.
When you do that, you have references in your mind for what it looked like last time, and you can always tell whether or not the guy has made a little bit of an impression or not, or whether you're easing away. And obviously, it's very comforting when you see that the target behind whatever it may be is getting smaller. When it gets a bit bigger, it tends to put a bit of spring in your step, and you've got to be careful that you don't change the rhythm too much and then start to make mistakes. One of the unique challenges of running the race meeting here from the point of view of the officials in race control, and this event is largely staffed in terms of senior personnel by the regular officials from Australia, from the Australian V8 Supercar Company and CAMS, with Tim Schenken, the race director, and Peter Wallerman, Colin Bond. But in race control, in the very building that we're in at the moment, there are no windows, so everything that they review or look at is done on closed circuit cameras on each of the corners, together with the Network 10 coverage. Just stop for a moment and think about how difficult that would be, where traditionally race control are able to see most of the things that are going on, but so far this weekend they've had a very quiet time, which has been good for them.
On top of that, the language barrier as well, communicating with the Chinese, the corner workers, the marshals. It has been somewhat of a challenging weekend, but so far so good. Daz?
Well, David Bernard, obviously not being a real good day. You've been in the wars.
No, not at all. Got a reasonable start, racing around, keeping out of trouble, and the splitter delaminated. So came in, swapped that over. The boys did a good job changing that. Going back out, just cruising around, saving tyres, seeing how the car is, and I think the engine's let go in a pretty big way. So it goes from bad to worse.
A few people have had splitter problems. Is that because drivers are clipping those tyres, or is it a different issue?
I don't think so. I think it's more the speed we're doing and the length of time we're doing it for, although it doesn't happen at Bathurst. But I did one in practice as well, so we can't really put our finger on it, but you just get a big vibration and eventually it just breaks the bottom off the splitter.
Hope it's better for race 3.
What do you do?
Tough day for David Bernard. You look at Marcus Ambrose. Ambrose maintains his 4th place.
He's about half a second shy of the pace that he needs, though, at the moment, and he's maintaining his 4th place, but he's just not in touch with the Missy Scaife at 2.6, Richards 2.6, Kelly 2.5. 53.1 it is for Ambrose, 53.7 for Radisich, 3.5 for Russell Ingall. Still 2.5 for Glenn Seaton, so he's very quick in this late stage.
There were some frayed tempers too within the Stone Brothers camp after qualifying yesterday. There was an incident out on track where it was a couple of incidents, we understand, between Marcus Ambrose and Russell Ingall, and Ingall was not at all happy, and we believe that the two had a discussion, nothing more, nothing less, but Ingall was not pleased.
It's all hands on deck down at the Super Cheap Auto garage on Greg Murphy's car. They are doing a full engine change here. Murphy's even got the hands a little bit dirty. They have the old engine out. They're getting the new one ready to go in. Steve Henderson at the front of the car, Greg Murphy's engineer now. As Lee mentioned in our commentary in race 1, they have decided, this team, to, for now at least, stick with the older 18-degree engine. They were going to upgrade to the new Holden Motorsport spec engine, but with the time between Eastern Creek and here at China, it was just a little too tight to complete the transformation. David is working, our cameraman, at the back of the car there now, and what you can see is that they have changed also the fuel tank in that car. A lot of undercarriage damage after that big launch through the gravel trap.
Yeah, I reckon there'd be a lot of repair work under that car. That was a huge impact it made across that little inroad, what do you call it, the access road there, and he just flew through the air on the other side.
Final 4 laps, and at the moment, with Scaife leading Richard 2nd and Kelly 3rd, those 3 guys are tied on points for the round. 124 each.
4 laps to go, mate. 4 laps. You're making good progress.
Barry Hay talking to Russell Ingall. Ingall is 6th at the moment, and he's got this man here, Glenn Seaton, chasing him down. Seaton was closer than where he's at now, so whether his car is dropping off or Ingall's is getting stronger in the latter stages of this race.
They both did almost identical lap times on the last lap, a 1:52.65 for Russell, a 1:52.69 for Glenn, so he's only 4/100ths slower. Marcus is the one that's just a little slower. Marcus and Paul Radisich are the 2 slower guys of the leading bunch at the moment. They're in the 53s.
When you look at the scope and the history of Australian motorsport, Neil, there's two significant guys here, well, three significant guys in Tim Schenken, Colin Bond and Dick Johnson. To be here in Shanghai watching V8 Supercars race, they would never have believed that their category could make it to this level.
No, it's very good, isn't it? I said last weekend on RPM when I came back from Avalon, when I saw the second group of cars loaded on the 747 down there, that this is a special moment for the history of Australian motorsport to take our premier category overseas, somewhere special, somewhere different, and certainly made an impact. I think most people would be genuinely and pleasantly surprised by the level of interest here in the crowd. A lot of media interest. I was surprised at how many visiting members we have from the Asia Pacific region, the motorsport and general media. So it's been a great exercise so far. Logistically, a very tough exercise for everybody involved, for the teams, for Avesco, for Network 10. Just a massive amount of work. All the simple little things that you just become very accustomed to working with back at home are not at your fingertips here. So the whole thing's got to be planned down to literally the last nut and bolt. And the next big part of the exercise is to load all these cars up and get them back, because we've got another big away game in Darwin, which is not exactly around the corner for our next round. But I think we've all got to speak volumes for the amount of hard work, planning and the beautiful execution by Gibson Freight. Bill Gibson and his team, his sons and his group, just done a fantastic job, and I don't think I've found anybody in the pit lane yet who hasn't just sung their praise for the outstanding job that they did in pulling together the equipment and just organisational skills of being able to shift all this gear over here. 2,500 kilos per team in those big containers. The cars on the pellets loaded up into the 747. That was all done so quickly and efficiently. Where's Seaton at the moment? Still a 52.5 for him this lap, 53.1 for Russell Ingall. So Glenn's just marching on. This is one of his real strengths. He is a very, very consistent driver, very smooth, doesn't oversteer or slide the car. And that's one of the reasons why in the last 2 years they've been so strong at Bathurst. He and Craig were a combo. Ooh, yeah.
Morris and Baird here. We just saw some shots of Greg Ritter. This will be his best result of the 05 season. He's 10th at the moment, so staying out did prove a wise decision for the Ford Performance Racing man. He's slotted in behind Cam McConville, ahead of Wheel. You look at Baird at the moment and Morris. This is the fight for 19th place. And Bright back in 21st. Reversal there for the FPR team to see Bright down, Ritter up. But that will bring some relief. Ritter was in the wars yesterday, ended up finishing 23rd. Was turned around, was tangling with people. But a good recovery in the second race. We're almost there too. Final 2 laps.
Not the position, mate. Hillary is not the position. Let Hillary pass, Kate.
Right, responding there, saying Paul Morris is for position, and I'm going to get him right now if I can up the inside into the hairpin. I'm not letting someone by when I can get by someone, and he does.
Well done, mate. Sorry about that.
Phil Key just in consultation there with Jason. All sounds pretty free and easy sitting here in the comfort of your television, but when you're in the race car and you're busy and a voice jumps into the middle of your head, it can sometimes be very off-putting. Most of the crew chiefs or engineers try and talk to the drivers when they're just working in a straight line rather than under brakes or in the turns, but it doesn't always work out that way.
Despite flat spotting that front left ever so slightly, it hasn't hindered the progress of Mark Scaife. The lead is now 3 seconds. He's at the hairpin. He's on his way to get notification of the final lap coming up. He had a win at Barbagallo in race 1. That put a big smile on his face. And then, of course, we know about the incident between he and Ambrose in race 2.
Goss, the leader entering the last lap now.
Last lap, mate. Last lap.
This will return the smile to the 5-time champion, Mark Scaife. 1 more lap to go, 4.6 kilometres, and he'll be there.
I bet he was wincing when he realised that he'd put a mark on that tyre
you say there was some radio communication? They were even contemplating bringing him in.
Rob Starr said to him, if it's risky, don't risk it, bring the car in. And they had a little chat about it. But obviously, unless you feel that it's a horror story, if you come in, then it is all over. So you want to try and stay out if you can. And Mark's been around long enough to make a very accurate assessment as to whether or not it's shaking too much and whether it could be down to the canvas, but obviously it wasn't.
And we ride with Stephen Richards. He will gather more valuable championship points and edge closer to Russell Ingall and Marcus Ambrose.
That's been a great battle between Stephen Richards and Todd Kelly. Neither of them have relented. Look how close they are even after 30-odd laps of racing.
There will be some tired drivers after this. They'll be fatigued somewhat. And the diminutive Kiwi's done well again. For Team Kiwi Racing, Radicic will bag a top 5 on the back of his solid result yesterday. Final run into this 1.4K back straight. Foot to the floor. Scaife's already at the hairpin. 2 more turns to go, and he'll grab his win. And this helps Mark Scaife tremendously in the championship, considering he is battling Craig Lowndes. He's 5th at the moment. Lowndes DNF'd in this race. Scaife takes race 2 in Shanghai.
Should be good for that last race. Well done. Tough guys, well done.
Todd Kelly drew very close to Stephen Richards. Very close at the end, but Richo got second ahead of Todd Kelly.
Work on it for the next one.
And there's Paul Forgy congratulating Marcus Ambrose on the radio, saying, well done, we got more points, 4th place is good. There is the official Red Army, but I can tell you there is a huge Red Army of HRT fans here in Shanghai that have made the trip up from Australia, bumping into them in the pit lane and around the place. They said, wow, right result yesterday for us. So they will be delighted with that. So too this man, Stephen Richards. Very solid performance. Ford's top finisher, Marcus Ambrose, 4th. His teammate Russell Ingall, 6th. So the Stone Brothers pair still the top performing Ford drivers in this one. And a pleasing result for Dodo Racing's Jamie Whincup. First time ever that he's had 2 top 10 results in a championship round.
Sets up a ripper race 3, doesn't it, with 3 guys tied, 124 points apiece. There's the unofficial. Scaife, Richards just over 2 seconds when they got to the line. Todd Kelly, so Holden 1, 2 and 3. Marcus Ambrose 4. Great job, Paul Radicic, as you mentioned, lead. Then Russell Ingall and Glenn Seaton very quick towards the end, both of those fellas. Bit of sugar for Jamie Whincup after a tough start to the weekend. Cam McConville will be pleased with that as well.